We're still here in chapter 7. Last time we were talking about labeling, right? And your first and secondary acts of deviance, like, you do something. First time, maybe it's just a one-off. But if you become associated or labeled, you have the choice, secondary act, of accepting that. I'm a class clown. I'm a bank robber. I'm a whoever, right? Or I could try to reject that label. Or I can try to change the perception of that label. This is, again, what a lot of folks don't realize about the whole arc of acceptance for the LGBTQ community was there was, hey, quit calling me that. Okay, yeah, I am gay. And then eventually it was, and your perception of gay is wrong. Like, you think it's all of these terrible things you've been told from the 1950s about what it means to be homosexual. And no, homosexual people are just like anybody else. They're couples, they have families, they do things like normal people. And for us, is labeling an act of social control. Now, as sociologists, we would say yes, and it's a social act. Your acceptance or not acceptance, you could say, okay, well, that's psychology, right? I'm either going to accept it or I'm not going to accept it. Or maybe I'm going to try to change society's opinion. But now we're involved in the social psychology of my perception of how I'm going to act. But the sheer act of calling you blank is an act of, in our opinion, of social control. So, for instance, right now, often on the far right, you hear teachers now have become the enemy, and now they're called groomers and pedophiles. And I got to tell you, somebody that works in education, good luck with that strategy. I mean, if you're going to make this low-paying job even more a hateful place, you might find it difficult to fill those positions. On the flip side, the right would say, all you people on the left are hating cops, right? And you made cops the bad guy. Well, good luck finding cops to fill the positions. And that would be a fair comment, because right now in Austin Police, I think it has like 100 open slots that they're having difficulty filling. And some of that, in both cases, could be attributed to the act of labeling and society saying, oh, because it used to be, this is what used to happen, because I taught in the K through 12 system for a while. You would get this, oh, you teach school? That's so wonderful of you. Translation, I would never do that job. You must be mentally ill. But at least there was that sort of, oh, you're doing great work. Thanks so much for doing it. Now it's like, oh, no, you're a teacher? Groomer, pedophile. Right, well, okay. Since I'm already making just above burger flipping wage as it is, I'm out. And we're having a terrible time keeping teachers in the job. We're moving on, though. Sutherland. I got to put a star by Sutherland. Okay, so this theory, it's an old theory. It's called differential association theory. And why do I like it? Okay, so while deviance may be a choice, it's a culmination of the people that you interact with. This is also going to be very similar to Hershey's social control theory, because they share this. They say, if you're around somebody, all right, so think about the first person maybe that, I don't know, offered you a cigarette or a beer before you were drinking age or something like that. Your likelihood to continue to engage in deviant activity, right, probably had a lot to do with how much time you spent with that person, the importance of that person in your life, your attachment, right? The closeness of that bond, right? So the point with Sutherland, and the reason I like Sutherland is because it's one of the few theories that could explain why somebody might, start drinking and shoplifting if, let's say, your favorite cousin that you hang out with all the time drinks and shoplifts. Then you're going to more than likely see that as being at least okay or value neutral. White collar crime, which I'm going to tell you, the most boring kind of crime, right, is one of the ones that we spend a lot of time with because it makes the least sense. It makes sense for poor people to steal. They don't have something, right? Why do rich people steal? That doesn't make sense. Why do they do corruption and stuff like that? Well, Sutherland's theory helps us figure that out. Okay, so I start my job as a little trader at Shearson Lehman Brothers, right? And the older traders go, no, this is how you do it. You get people to, sign up, and then you sell them these worthless stocks that have high commissions, and you make a big lot of bank. What happens to my customer? Who cares what happens to the customer? Isn't that illegal? Aren't we using inside information? Nobody cares about that. Just keep trading and make money. Just keep trading and make money. It explains both, right? Because of the people that you're around, you go, oh, well, they must know what they're doing. They know how it's done, right? Think about the times perhaps that you've done something deviant in your past. Not even criminal, just say deviant. Usually you probably had some help of people saying, yeah, it's all right. Go ahead. It's okay. It'd be fine. Right, let's do it together. And you're like, yeah. And then the more you do it, you become sort of committed to that. You become accepting of this. Hershey goes into more of this control theory about, what types of bonds keep you. But I kind of see them as being related in that what they're saying is, if you look at two siblings, right? Maybe even in your own family, right? Maybe there's a good sibling and a bad sibling. And you probably know where you fit in that. I'm not going to ask about that. We're just going to throw there's probably a difference there. But I think you probably could look at who those people might be hanging with, right? So you got two siblings. Let's say they're twins, right? But twin A hangs out with one group of people and twin B hangs out with a different group. And sure enough, their behaviors start to differentiate based on that, right? Let's talk about the law and crime, right? Because remember, deviance is just doing something society isn't comfortable with per se, or that is an outlier. If we make a law, it's a crime. So violent crime, I think that pretty much makes sense, right? That's you hurting or doing something mean to somebody. Nonviolent crime. Another one that we study that everyone says is boring is corporate crime, but I got to tell you, this is so in the latest trial of the former president, people kept saying what he did wasn't even really breaking the law, and the state of New York goes, no, here are the laws. This is breaking the laws, and I love it. Every so often they'll actually get up and say the quiet part out loud, and one of these pundits on one of the business channels went, but if we start putting people in jail, we'll have to put all the real estate and business people in jail. And I thought, oh my God, you're onto something there. But I don't think he really meant it the way I was interpreting it, which was, hey, maybe all of y'all should be locked up. Because what he was saying is it's a very common business practice to take $1 million property and say it's worth $3 million when you're trying to get a loan, right? And say it's worth $100,000 when it's time to pay taxes. And he said, well, but that's not even really breaking the law. Sorry. Yeah, it is. And if you doubt it, you try it. Try and tell the IRS that your house or your parents' house is only worth $10,000. And see if you have any luck with that. Or try and get a loan and say that your $100,000 house is now worth $1 million. That's actually fraud. That's actually bank fraud. So, we spend some time looking at that. People go, oh, that's boring. But again, what we're confused by is it makes sense for the poor, as we conceptualize crime, to go against the system. Even going back to Marx, right? Crimes of resistance, stealing the loaf of bread. But the rich commit crimes, and while we might not see this as directly related, as like, oh, well, where was the victim in this crime? Well, if I'm a rich person and I take a loan for $500 million from the bank, can the bank then loan 100 of you $5 million? No, right? Because where's that $500 million? With me. And I've got it by lying and misleading. Other kinds of crimes that are usually what we talk about as victimless crimes are like drugs and prostitution. And one of the things that we've done is question that. Is prostitution victimless? Well, since most people don't grow up going, geez, you know what I'd like to be? A prostitute. Though, I gotta say, as we'll talk about in the next chapter, the effect of media is kind of creepy. There is this time period. Do you remember a movie called Pretty Woman with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts? There for a 3.5 to 4 year time period when we would do these things like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like middle school and high school kids, girls were saying, I want to be Pretty Woman. Yeah, and you'd be like, okay, we did a bad job on that one because we made prostitution look all like glamorous and like, hey, nobody going to show up and save you. People don't look like Richard Gere. They don't drive Lamborghinis. That is not the life. Is drugs victimless? Two different ways to look at that. One, absolutely it's not victimless. People get hooked and they get on drugs and they can't get away. Flip side of that argument. Well, that's because making it illegal puts those people in charge of that resource. So we look at something, one that I always love to see the look at people's eyes when I do this in public is to go, let's look at alcohol. And people went, we're talking about drugs. Yeah. You see how that works though? If it's so common, right, in our culture, we stop realizing that actually most of the deaths from drugs are not fentanyl or heroin or whatever. It's alcohol. Alcohol is a drug. And when we made it illegal, a couple of things happened. By the way, it was a failure. Actually, it wasn't. Cirrhosis of the liver, crimes and deaths related to alcohol went down. But the profile of the crimes that did happen, right, the sort of gangland slayings, the Al Capone period, that became very salient to the public, right? When we look at drugs, when the mob, organized crime, controlled alcohol, yeah, it got to be a very dangerous, very at times lucrative, and you didn't know what you were buying. We watched that. If you watch cable, there's a show about moonshiners, and these are represented as good meaning, good old boys out in the sticks of Kentucky, and I'm sure that some of them are, but some of them are also cooking up some kind of kerosene-like stuff and selling it, and people are buying it. When we made it legal, right, now you don't have to worry about Jack Daniels being made partially with kerosene. It's made the way Jack Daniels is made. And by the way, yes, you could still drink too much of it, drive, kill yourself, die, or actually drink so much of it, you just stop breathing. Hate crimes. Now, your book talks about this. Based on a person's race, religion, or other identifiable characteristics. The Klan, this was used to help dismantle a lot of the institutional power that the Ku Klux Klan had, and others, including like white nationalists, by declaring their organizations and their activities as hate crimes, right? And it's not that we sociologists want to stop the party, because we're one of the biggest proponents of people understanding that racism in our society is a problem. But we're flipping the model back on its right here, deviance, like what were you thinking and how did that label affect you and what you made as a choice? Okay, you have decided to shoot somebody. Now I, as the prosecution or the police, have to decide what was in your mind when you shot them. Now, some people are nice enough to leave like little testimonies about why they go on shootings, and it's clear it's racially motivated. Like that wackadoodle that gets, it's always in Texas, gets in his car in Dallas, drives all the way to El Paso to shoot up a Walmart, right? Because of all the illegal immigrants. Remember this? This was 5 years back. Not that there weren't Walmarts in Dallas, but he wanted to shoot, and he put on, God bless you folks, in your Snapchat and your Facebook, and just no thought goes out of your head without it being chronicled, and he told people, this is why I'm doing it. Well, clearly, that's a hate crime, right? He's written it down. I plan to shoot these people. These people are my enemy. But back to our original thing, you just decide to shoot somebody. Well, obviously, you probably didn't like them, i.e. hate. But then it becomes very difficult for us to go, well, was that based on their religion or their sex or some other thing? Or was it because you kept parking, in front of their trash can and they just got nutter butter about it and decided to, what's going on in the mind of the killer when we don't have any of these specific manifestos? That's hard. Though clearly there are hate crimes. Like if you go into a synagogue like that guy in Pittsburgh did and shoot up the synagogue, that wasn't by mistake. The guy in, was it Charlottesville, that went into the church and then shot up a Sunday school meeting, he had left plenty of things behind. The weird part about that one was he sat through the whole thing. And then he stood up and usually, on these spree killings, they kind of come in all, wound up, and then they, kind of go Rambo style. I don't know, how do you sit and talk to somebody for an hour and go, okay, that was fun. Now I'm going to kill all of you. Clearly, that could fall into that category. But now let's talk about something infinitely more boring. The crime rate. Oh, yes, I know, very boring. But important for us because people say crime rate, and I guarantee you 90% of the people that have used that term or they discuss crime, including the talking heads on any of the news networks, have no idea what they're talking about. First of all, what is the crime rate? The crime rate is 8 index crimes. Now, I'm going to have you write them down and know this for the next test. It's a good extra credit question, right? These are the 8 index crimes. When people say the crime rate, that means murder, rape, aggravated assault, robbery, theft, burglary, car theft, arson. Now, for those of you paying attention, you might say, hey, didn't you say taking stuff 4 different times, 4 different ways? Very perceptive. Yes. Robbery, theft, burglary, and car theft are all taking things that don't belong to you. But isn't that all the same thing? Theft. This is how I remember it. If I were to go and steal your backpack, that's theft. If I pulled out a gun and said, give me your backpack, that's robbery. If I sneak into a building and do it, that's burglary. And stealing a car is just car theft, right? Okay, so 3 things. I thieve a thing, I rob a person, I burgle a house or a building. Make sense? Now, Marxists point out, so that means, and then you have arson, which is mostly a property crime. So 5 of the 8 things is about property, and only 3 are about stuff that when I say crime, the things that people get really anxious about are only these things. And simple assault is not on there at all. So somebody just pushing you or whatever. Aggravated assault, where they use a weapon or something like that, that is on there. So, where do we even get this? It's compiled by the FBI from your local police departments. And it creates something called a Uniform Crime Report by the FBI. Now, I'm sure what you're thinking, though, is, wow, but that's got to be most crimes, Dr. Turley. I mean, you're talking about all the crimes that, no. These crimes compose less than 12% of crimes. Most crimes are alcohol and drug related. They're not in the crime rate at all. So, And one could argue, well, Dr. Turley, you said last time crime rate's going down. It is going down. But what about all those other crimes? We actually have to go to a whole separate set of reports to look at, is drug crime coming up? Is alcohol crime going up? All of that is separate. How we get this is important because, believe it or not, and this is going to surprise a lot of you, this group of people sometimes lie. And not in faraway places like Alabama or Georgia, or if you want, New York City and New Jersey. No. Boston. I think it was 7 years ago, a group of lieutenants and captains, I think some of them got demoted and fired because they lied about their data. Because to get a promotion, you have to be seen as showing that you're pushing crime down in your sector of the city. Well, what if you got a high crime sector? How are you going to show that? Pretty easy, actually. You take all the aggravated assaults and you make them simple assaults. Or you play the arrested, charged, convicted game. Because rape and murder take a long time, right? So I might get arrested in 2023, right? And I might try to fudge the numbers. Well, they were arrested, but they weren't convicted. So we don't know if that was a rape or not until 2024. And then when it's 2024, you go, well, that was last year's crime. I don't got to put that down. How you label a crime turns out to hold some power. You've probably heard, hang on a second. You've probably heard about, well, the incidence of rape is higher than that which is reported. You may have wondered, like I did, well, how do you know that? If it's not reported, what are you, like leprechauns telling you? Like, how do you know? This is the National Crime Victimization Survey. Instead of asking cops what has been reported to you, we ask people, has this happened to you? And this is where we get, oh yeah, no, it's much higher. Because one of the things, did you ever report this to the police? No. And so simply put, I had my car radio stolen. I've actually had my car radio stolen 3 times. I've only reported it once. The first time I waited around for an hour, right here in Austin, waited around for a cop to come. This is back when car radios were a thing to steal. I know everyone's now plugged into your phones, but back then you used to have like CD players, and it was a big deal. And I had a nice one in my little car. Didn't have much of a car, but I had a really cool radio. And the cop literally walked out with a clipboard and went, "Someone took your car radio." Well, damn, Barty Fife, thank God you're here. What are you going to do about it? Now, of course, I've seen the CSI. I'm looking for him to, what about the lasers and the fingerprint kit? He goes, yeah. You fill that out and you give it to your insurance company. And he turned around. I said, is that it? He goes, yeah. So the next 2 times that I had my car radio stolen, did I bother waiting around for the hour for the police? No. Did the police even know that my car radio was stolen? No. So sometimes this tells us a lot about crimes that either go underreported. Here's another one that I found interesting when I was doing gang research. I was looking at female gang members in Texas, and I was anticipating a fair amount of them would probably have had, some sexual molestation or whatever in their past. What I wasn't expecting was that well over a quarter of the male gang members also reported sexual abuse in their past. And at first that didn't make sense, and then I started to think about it. Sometimes you hear a big fact and you got to sit there and let it kind of percolate. Okay, so if I'm a guy and I've been sexually victimized at 12 or 14, I might choose a hyper-violent, hyper-masculine expression of my anger, right? Because perhaps I don't feel that my parents are protecting me, right? Or my family isn't protecting me. So I'm going to get this hyper-violent group of fellow gang members. They're going to be my protection. I'm going to act out of this rage. I'm going to have this affiliation as a potential reaction to that victimization. And we're going to pause here.